Midnight is literally going to be the craziest WoW expansion we had ever gotten in all of WoW's history. Despite us being attacked every 2 years, the Void Lord invasion and the awakening of Azeroth is literally the biggest danger Azeroth was ever in. We're talking like we are going to witness the first ordering of Azeroth type danger. We will see literal Void Lords, the Light Army, the final battle of these two forces that have been battling each other since the universe was born. We will see a massive revamp of old Azeroth, Amani trolls, elven reunions, possible faction war, the literal return of the Titans by the end. Best of all, even crazier things have been going on behind the scenes in terms of the devs, and based on recent interviews, it's almost certain that Midnight and the Last Titan are really picking up where the story left off back in Legion. The sword, Sargeras, Illidan, and everything related to that. So let's look at everything we know about this massive upcoming WoW expansion that will be announced in less than 6 months. So while big updates are coming, I've just opened a second channel for Raid where I've released over a dozen videos, and I'd really appreciate if you guys could check it out because a huge update is currently going on with a free brand new legendary champion alias that you can get by simply logging in right after you download the game with my link in the description or the QR code on the screen. The new update is still going strong with 5 brand new legendaries from the coolest stories like the Queen of Hearts, Mad Hatter, Cheshire Cat, and Alice that you can get for free by logging in for 7 days. I've geared her up entirely, she is now one of my main characters, and you can check out my review on why you should pick her. So if you're finally looking at the start raid, check out my link in the description, you will get an amazing head start, and I've also got a bunch of guides so you can avoid the same mistakes that I made, and you'll be able to advance much quicker from campaigns to dungeons to clan boss and arenas so that you can get into the late game content where it gets really fun. I'm a mid-game player myself, I've also recently opened a clan so I need all the support that I can get, and best of all, Raid is cross-platform so you can play it anywhere. So click link in the description or just scan the QR code on the screen and you will get the legendary hero Alice and 2 epic champions for free only with my link. You'll get Tagore on sign up, Ugo at level 15, and a whole bunch of stuff in between. Plus, you can use the promo code Monkey King to get another free legendary. So check out my link and also check out my second channel, Doran's Arena. So let's be realistic, so far the War Within is a good expansion. I mean, it's the first time in the past 5 years or so that people are actually feeling very optimistic about World of Warcraft, about Blizzard, and are excited for the future. But in terms of the actual storyline, the War Within is really not all that out of the box, not all that crazy. Now don't get me wrong, there are some really exciting brand new storylines in the works, but just think about it logically. I mean, almost everything people are excited about for this World Soul Saga is what will happen by the end of this expansion and Midnight and the Last Titan. Very few people are going absolutely crazy about the goblins, Undermine, dwarves, or Khazar itself, or the Haranir. What people are really interested in are the upcoming Void Invasion, Zealotat, Void Lords. They're excited about the Titan involvement and enslavement of Azeroth, what is really going on with Azeroth. They're interested in Beledar, what it is. They're interested in the Old Gods, the return to revamped Quel'Thalas, and revamped Northrend. Most of the exciting lore is starting with the end of the War Within and the start of Midnight, and this is where things are really going to start getting good. Of course, this is only natural because we are getting into the World Soul Saga, which is a trilogy, and in most cases, I mean by definition, in a trilogy the first part is the prelude that sets everything up. However, in the case of this expansion and the World Soul Saga, there are a few more things at stake here behind the curtain that a lot of people don't know. Recently we got an interview from a former Blizzard CEO that gave us a huge insight into what happened behind the scenes post-Legion and why WoW really started going downhill. Now, don't get me wrong, no one is saying this guy's a good guy now, but it did confirm a few things we already believed. So, as you may be aware, Chris Metzen is one of the original masterminds of Warcraft itself as a franchise. He started working on it back in the 90s, he even did some of the early artwork, he really created it from the foundation. He is one of the main guys responsible for most of our success, and while he did misstep a bit around Worlds of Draenor, he did bring the magic back in Legion. However, here are a few things that happened that were just revealed. First, there was some big drama around the Warcraft's movie, some disagreement. Then Chris Metzen didn't like the direction where WoW was going after Legion. He obviously had something different in mind post the entire Sargeras thing other than BFA in the Shadowlands. He knew this storyline wouldn't do well and he left despite the CEO begging him to come back. Once again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying BFA was as bad as the Shadowlands, the expansion performed much better. However, I'm talking about the storyline here. It's undeniable that BFA and Shadowlands were like the initial World Soul Saga, just with 2 parts instead of 3. Literally the entire storyline of BFA was supposed to set up the culmination in the Shadowlands. The Shadowlands was supposed to be a really big deal, so with Shadowlands failing, the entire story BFA seems really ridiculous. I mean, the whole faction war was orchestrated by the Zowal guy. Literally everything that happened in BFA was created by the jailer. Something obviously happened here. I mean, Chris Metzen wrapped up the storyline in Legion. He planted a sword in that by now iconic cinematic, and he obviously planned to do something with this storyline next. However, it does appear that things happened that completely derailed his plans. He left, and then the story went in a completely different direction. Now, Chris Metzen returned during Dragonfight. It is now so obvious that this World Soul Saga was what was supposed to come all the way back in 2018 after Legion. Like, this is the missing WoW storyline. However, keep things in mind, I can almost guarantee that Chris Metzen didn't have too much to do with the War Within, and he might have only impacted like half of the development at most, but his true projects are Midnight and The Last Titan. Remember Blizzard timelines, I mean, back when they announced the saga, they already told us a team is already working on The Last Titan, so it's likely that the War Within was being worked on even back in the Shadowlands. Remember, the Blizzard team talking about a new saga coming around the Shadowlands finale, they already had the War Within plan, no doubt. They also tested these features in the Zaralak Caverns and Dragonfight for the War Within, so I'm almost certain half of the expansion was already finished by the time Chris Metzen organized things. My point here is that we should really be excited for Midnight. By all the current hints, roadmaps, and interviews, Midnight is going to be the expansion where the old WoW starts again. You can see this dissonance in the War Within. I mean, we're talking about the Sword of Sargeras, which is all about the saga. Chris Metzen is talking about how this is a Last Titan thing, yet it is the opening of the War Within. It really seemed like they just did this retroactively, which is why we're going from Kazakar to Quel'Thalas to Northrend, just jumping around. It really seems like the War Within was originally supposed to be yet another newly discovered island expansion like Dragonfight, but then Chris Metzen returned and decided to tie it in back into his original old plan for WoW. As I said, expect WoW Midnight and The Last Titan to literally be like a sequel to Legion. By pretty much all of the hints we had gotten so far, right now Blizzard is heavily ignoring most of the post-Legion storyline. They're even trying to sort of retcon some Shadowlands lore with some quests and books by kinda muddying the waters, saying, yeah, that lore you might have heard back in the day, that was just biased, it might not all be true, so they can't really outright retcon it, but they're just trying to say maybe this is not the case. However, the real question is, why should we be excited for Midnight? Is this yet another YouTube video talking about how an expansion is going to be amazing before it's even announced? Well, I would say let's just look at the evidence that we currently have. Midnight is going to be an expansion unlike any we had previously gotten on Azeroth objectively. First of all, the expansion is going to be a revamp-based expansion, returning to, as Chris Metzen says, to the old world, which is something that people have heavily requested. Now, you might say, this isn't all that revolutionary. I mean, we did get Cataclysm that brought us back to the old world, revamped the entire planet. There was a much bigger revamp than Midnight, and you're right, I mean, this is kind of in that old expansion spirit. However, in terms of the actual storyline, this is legit going to be the craziest time ever on Azeroth, like literally in all of Azeroth's history. I know, once again, you could say, how is that really the case? I mean, Azeroth is invaded every 2 years. First the orcs, the undead, the demons, Deathwing, faction wars, crazy dead guys, and yeah, all of that is true. Out of all of these, the biggest threat to ever out of them has been the Burning Legion. However, this new threat is objectively a much bigger threat than any we had previously faced. Chris Metzen told us that Xel'Tath is a long-term villain. She isn't here to be a patch boss. She will very likely be around until The Last Titan, or at least the end of Midnight. She also isn't a big bad villain. She is only, as far as we know her, the Harbinger that is bringing the real villain to Azeroth. Midnight also appears to be the first expansion that starts where we actually lose. We're getting a full-on Void invasion that literally never happened in Azeroth's past. In terms of Legion invasions, I mean, these were happening constantly. We already had a massive one in the past, but the Void, in this manner, had never previously invaded Azeroth, and this opponent is unlike any we had ever faced. Almost certainly, we're literally going to see the Void Lords themselves for the first time ever in this game, and so far we only knew of 2 of them that are named Dementius and Invalidus. Then we were told that the Light Army will come and this will be the final battle between the Light and the Void. I mean, just think about how crazy this actually is. I mean, the Light and the Void had been battling each other since the universe was born, and this ultimate battle is going to happen now, here, and we are going to witness it. It's almost as if we're witnessing the ordering of Azeroth by the Titans when it happened back in ancient history. Even crazier than that, we are literally going to witness something akin to that, as we were told in Midnight, things will spiral wildly out of control and the Titans return, which leads us into Northrend. So as I said, completely objectively, the overarching main storyline of Midnight is the craziest that it ever was. It by far overshadows the massive Legion invasion happened back in Legion. I mean, we're talking about Sargeras and Illidan actually coming to Azeroth, the sword being relevant again, the entire ordeal. Like, this is literally going to be like the finale of WoW, and it really begins with Midnight. However, that is just for the overarching storyline, but other things that got planned are insanely interesting as well. We're talking about a massive elven reunion, which is something that hasn't happened since Quel'Thalas was destroyed by Arthas back in Warcraft 3. We're talking about a brand new Silver Moon, and not just Silver Moon, but new and enlarged Quel'Thalas. By definition, this is bringing back the Amani trolls, which have an insanely long and interesting history and are incredibly interesting characters. We're also getting player housing around Orgrimmar and Stormwind prior to Midnight's release, but they did heavily implied that it will expand in this manner later down the line, very likely with new locations. Furthermore, with recent changes to Undercity and Gilneas and the new Arathi storylines in the old Dalaran ruins, we're legit looking at potentially this entire portion of the Eastern Kingdoms being subject to a massive revamp, which could be insanely interesting, as we're talking about potentially revamping former Lordran, the lands of Arthas and Theranos, and there is some crazy storyline potential here, especially now with some of the OG writers back writing this game. Furthermore, we can data mine ethereals, which could imply a whole lot of things, potentially a new playable race. We will very likely get a new race or a class in Midnight. Other than this, you might have missed it, but Blizzard also hinted at faction conflict happening as well, which is nearly impossible to predict at the moment. But think about something going on with Aurelian and the Light Army, and Anduin potentially returning to leading the Alliance once again. We also got the seeds they planted for a brand new Draenei capital, which could be a storyline. And in terms of patch content for Midnight, we could potentially be looking at actually visiting the ancient planet of Karesh, or maybe the involvement of these crazy Arathi humans we had just discovered and their actual mainland empire. Furthermore, Scarlet seem to be relevant, all the Dalaran. Now, best of all, when it comes to Midnight, we're literally getting the expansion announcement in less than 6 months, which is crazy, seeing that it has only been a few months since the War Within was released, which is the fastest we had ever gotten content in WoW in all of its history. So literally, by all the metrics, big times are ahead for WoW, and it starts with Midnight. Thanks for watching. Check out my video on revamps of Orgrimmar and Stormwind by clicking on the screen, and check out my new raid channel by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.